Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Grand Rounds. I'm Tom Farden, and I chair and organise Grand Rounds. Thanks very much for coming today. We heard last calendar year about the curriculum update that's going on within the medical school. And I'm delighted that my friend Ellie Hothersall will be speaking to us today about the progression of that new curriculum and how we're rolling that out. We had a very fascinating talk earlier last year about decolonizing the curriculum from our students. I think Ellie's going to touch on the work that's been going on with that to see how we're taking that seriously within the medical school and how we're pushing things on. The Guardian University Guide puts the Dundee University Medical School as the 6th ranked medical school in the UK, sandwiched neatly between Oxford and Cambridge. So we're consistently high up in those league tables, having been number one a couple of times, but it's hard to stay at the top. And in such times of change and turmoil and with remote teaching and blended learning, etc., I'm interested to find out from Ellie today, what is the medical school doing? How are we keeping our teaching current? How are we keeping our students engaged? As a father of a 18-year-old who's just gone to university, it's a challenge to keep students engaged from their own bedroom and in front of a screen all day long. So how are we managing that? What's the curriculum going to look like? And a bit about decolonization. So Ellie, thanks very much for coming today. Looking forward to your talk. Here you go.
Thanks, Tom. I'll try to answer all of those bits. I may not cover everything in as much depth as people would like, but I'm very easy to contact at any time by email or anything else. I apologize if I continue to cough and splutter my way through this presentation. My respiratory function is not always the best at the moment. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try and remember not to talk too fast, but it's all so exciting that I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity to talk about it all. I do not like being old, though, because I find that with every passing year, I become less and less technologically capable. Tom, you are the only face I can see on the screen at the moment. Can you just wave to me to indicate if you can see my slides all right? Fab. Thank you so much. So I am going to run through 3 elements of around the curriculum review today. So really what I'm trying to do is to focus in on some areas that have been perhaps things that we have been developing which are specific to our own new curriculum rather than generic to medical education more generally. But I'm going to start by just telling you where we've got to with the update. And then right at the end, I'm going to try and convince you all that you really want to be part of our next steps and to come and be part of this exciting new step. So talking about the changes to the curriculum generally, you will have seen slides like this before, really highlighting the large number of drivers we have had pushing us to make some changes to our curriculum. So the introduction of outcomes for graduates in 2018 is the most recent in a series of changes around the philosophy of medical education in the UK, pushing us to really very much concentrate on the end product, which is a foundation year doctor. And whether or not you think that's the end product is again a topic for another day, but really making sure that there are a series of high level learning outcomes that all graduates across the UK have achieved. In addition to that, the GMC are introducing this medical licensing assessment, which will be a mandatory qualification before you are given a license to practice from 2025 onwards. And so we need to ensure that our teaching and assessment processes are aligned with that to give our students an easy passage, or as easy a passage as possible through that assessment process. You'll be aware that there's a strong push to increase the provision of general practice teaching within the curriculum, as encouraged by Valois's work, for example, and then Scottish Government have come in on the back of that. Realistic medicine has changed our philosophy around medicine more generally, and we want to incorporate that into our education. NHS Tayside being the main provider for us of NHS teaching, we have worked very closely with many colleagues from within NHS Tayside as we've thought about how to review and revise our curriculum. And we're very aware of the changes in the way that teams are staffed, in the way that they run, in the changes in capacity in things like clinic provision and so on over time. And so our changes to curriculum have really been building those differences in capacity into how we've thought about things. During COVID, the university has worked towards the Race Equality Charter Bronze Award, which has just been granted. And so across the whole of the university, there's been a lot of thinking around equality and diversity, and the medical school has been really involved in those decisions and in those discussions. And I'm going to tell you quite a bit about the work that we've been doing there and what our next steps are. And finally, there's been just a couple of other things going on over the last couple of years, some kind of weird virus thing that you might have heard about. And that has had a change in how we live our lives, and very dramatic change in how we teach and how we interact with each other. So what we want to do with the new curriculum is to ensure that we take the best bits of the changes and adaptations that we've made over the last couple of years to ensure that we are doing good quality online teaching where that is the most appropriate thing, but we are giving students opportunity for face-to-face teaching and team building where that works well. So trying to make sure that what we are doing is that trade-off between good and repeatable teaching, face-to-face, building community, and so on. So it's a lot of different things to be juggling, and I hope that as the curriculum starts to roll out in August, September this year, you will see the positive changes that we think we're bringing around. So the headline changes are that within years 1, 2, and 3, we will spend more time being more explicit around the basic science work. Many of you, Tom included, will now comment that the pendulum around basic science teaching swings endlessly from fully integrated to fully separate and back again. But what we feel we need at the moment is to give students a larger amount of time in first year to learn the foundations of medicine. And so the basic science time in first year will be increased compared to what it is just now. And then in second and third year, both those years will begin with a foundations of medicine block, trying to give the students an opportunity to integrate the science and the clinical elements that they are learning so that they can consolidate. And that will hopefully give them that opportunity to keep coming back to things and rebuilding that spiral that in some places we have not had quite so clearly articulated for a number of reasons over time. We are also going to restructure year 4, and I know many colleagues have been involved in that over the last 12 months or so, discussing how that's going to work. So we're going to move from the current 10 4-week block structure to 5 8-week blocks, and those will be linked by theme, by setting rather, and then across all 5 years we will have a new role, which is we're calling the integrated teacher. Integrated teachers will bring the professionalism and portfolio elements of what we want to teach really to the fore and give lots of opportunity for reflection on learning elsewhere. And then in 4th year in particular, there'll be a real emphasis on the primary care and secondary care interface in order to help students to see the continuity of care for students, and as a happy byproduct, increase the amount of primary care teaching that we are fitting into year 4. The skills passport has been revamped and is now integrated into the portfolio review in final year in a more understandable and clear way. And as I already mentioned, the assessment is being reviewed along with everything else to ensure that we are assessing the things we're teaching, but also to ensure that the medical licensing assessment will slot into our assessment process in a seamless and ideally friction-free way. I'm mindful I might have said ideally a couple of times already, and I'll say it a lot more because I think that what I'm really talking about today are the aspirational bits. So this slide gives a really, really high level overview of how we think of the whole curriculum as being structured. So starting at the bottom with year 1, we're talking about the basics and the basic principles, and in years 2 and 3, which used to be, so all 3 of those years used to be systems in practice. We're really building the spiral. We're helping students be introduced over those 3 years to the same concepts, elaborating as we go, so that in 4th and 5th year, they are really ready to develop their clinical and professional identities and to hit the ground running from the day they graduate. We identified a number of longitudinal themes which we want to be clear and to make nicely signposted and joined up across all the 5 years. So these are your vertical arrows on the right-hand side of the screen. So most of them should be fairly familiar to you, I would think. So we've been working on clinical reasoning. We have therapeutics and prescribing, scholarship and the student selected components, all of which I'm sure you're already aware of. And the last one is the personal, social and professional development theme, which is our generalization for the 2 longitudinal themes I'm going to talk about today, which are the Dundee Doctor and then the bigger picture. I am sure you have seen this picture before because ever since the curriculum review meeting we held in February 2019, where this wonderful piece of art was generated for us, we've used it a lot as a way of showing the complexity of what we are trying to simplify, if you see what I mean. And what I wanted to do today was to just really steal a couple of elements from this to focus in on and show you how it is that we are progressing some of these more conceptual areas. So thinking about the Dundee Doctor, I've stolen this section from that larger map. And these are the concepts that really, for as long as we've been doing any data gathering, we have been hearing again and again from colleagues when we talk about what it is that makes us proud of Dundee Doctors. Why is it that we think of Dundee graduates as being so skilled, so talented? What is it that we're really trying to articulate there? And I think that these phrases you can see in front of you now probably chime with what you will have said or will have thought. There is only one slight problem with using these phrases as our descriptors for the Dundee Doctor, and that is that most of them are actually articulated within the Outcomes for Graduates framework, which the GMC have described. And if you think about it, that makes sense, because actually a lot of the values that we are proud of are values that you would want to see in a doctor wherever they graduate from. So when we're thinking about the Dundee Doctor strand or theme within our curriculum, we're really trying to work out how we add a plus to that. So what is the plus bit of Dundee Doctors? Now, we haven't finished articulating this yet, and we are still happy to have discussions if there are elements which you would like to see us articulate more clearly. But we've been working recently with the TILT team, and we've come up with, this is, if you access this online when it's available, this is an interactive infographic. So each of these blue rectangles is a section which opens up there on the left-hand side to highlight what it is we mean. So when we talk about our students being particularly good team workers, these are the elements that we mean by that. And what we are trying to say is that we think this is something that our students do above and beyond what we would describe as the requirements of outcomes for graduates. And we hope to use this as a way of helping colleagues across the learning experience, so students and staff and external examiners and visitors, to all see what it is that we are working towards and so proud of. And my thanks to the TILT team for bringing up this. This is Eve Law's work, and thanks to her for this draft. And I'm sure she would be very happy to receive any feedback on it that you'd like to give. There are, of course, challenges in talking about the Dundee Doctor, and what, you know, I've listed them here. It is hard to keep everything which is important visible within our curriculum, within our learning environment, within our physical environment. So we need to work from here on how we have this in people's minds. I have a colleague in a different medical school who has their equivalent infographic included in their electronic signature with every email they send. And it is such a large picture that this then doubles the length of most of their emails. So I'm not sure that's the route we're going to go down. But again, any answer you've got on a postcard would be great. I think it's important that we communicate these concepts clearly. So this is one effort to do that. We need to make sure, therefore, that the message is clear and that we are all confident that the elements that we are describing are the ones that we want to emphasize. And we need to ensure that where elements of teaching are emphasizing that plus bit, we need to make sure that the time and the effort is valued by the staff and by the students, because this is an investment above the minimum requirements for a doctor. And so we need to make sure that that is articulated and built into how we plan, so that we really give it the value that it deserves. This picture comes from, as the note tells you on the right-hand side, comes from Jefferson Medical College in around 1900. And it is one of many hundreds of similar pictures that you can find of medical education through the ages. If you have ever been lucky enough to visit an ancient lecture theatre, such as they have it still in Italy and other areas, the format for much of the teaching has not changed in a very long time, and the audience had not changed in a very long time. And I'm really struck in this picture by the fact that essentially this is a room full of the elite who are all white. And one of the things that we really are pushing to do in Dundee at the moment is to change the culture of medical education. So to steal another little element from the big picture from earlier on, I pulled this out, and I really felt that this was one of those opportunities for me to talk about taking responsibility for how we change the culture within the school. And when we're talking about culture change, the Dundee Doctor element really feeds into this for me. Some of the elements that we're talking about are around talking about and then actually doing something about what we do when we are approaching issues related to equality, diversity, and inclusivity. What we're doing about multi-professional approaches, how we talk about the other professions within healthcare and more widely. Social accountability, and I'm going to come back to that. Civility, as in how we talk to each other and everybody else. And also improving our culture around feedback and how we give that learning advice and information to students. I'm not going to talk more about feedback today because Lynn Urquhart is going to do a different grand rounds on how we improve our feedback culture in a couple of weeks' time. I'm sure that you have seen Jenny Harden and Harvey, I do apologise, Jenny Harden's in Edinburgh, and Sarah Ross's equality and diversity slides, and I'm very grateful to them for letting me steal the next couple. So this is from a presentation, as you can see, from June 2021, where Jenny was talking about the different strands the school is pulling together as part of improving our approach to equality, diversity and inclusion. And you can see the bottom right there, number 8 is curriculum. And we have committed to reviewing what we do to ensure that we are bringing the right focus and the right lens into our teaching. So when we are talking about tackling racism within the undergraduate taught environment, the actual overt teaching and learning is just one part of that bigger component. And you'll see staff development features there very strongly, how we support individual students where they are encountering issues, how we support staff and students in terms of raising concerns, and ensuring that our staff and student liaison lets us identify issues, whether at individual level or system level, at an earlier point. When we talk about teaching and learning, we think of that as having 3 components. Although again, there may be more. So thinking about the concept relating to racism itself, how we give students and staff practical skills for addressing the issues, and then a system level thing around diversity in clinical practice. Again, Sarah has covered these before, but we have identified a number of areas where we want to have explicit and dedicated teaching to allow students the opportunity to really explore some of these issues. And some of them will be very much focusing on ethnicity and race as the focus, and appropriately so, while some of the others may well overlap with other groups who experience discrimination. Because I think it's really important that we have a clear picture for students about how elements like intersectionality, where more than one source of discrimination can play off against each other and compound people's problems. And again, this is not a complete list, so I wouldn't want you to think that we have missed anything at this point, but if you think that we are, there's another area that you would really like us to develop, we would be happy to take feedback on that. In terms of practical skills, the areas we've been looking at so far are around management of discrimination, ensuring that our students get an understanding of and training in active bystanding. In other words, is not allowing a racist or other discriminatory comment or action to go unchallenged, and also specific work on raising concerns. And finally, I mentioned the diversity in clinical practice area. So here, just thinking about how we ensure that students' experiences and the patients, simulated patients and so on, that students are encountering is more representative of the makeup of the population of the UK as a whole, rather than necessarily always being limited to more homogeneous groups that you might encounter, for example, in some parts of Dundee. So all of these are large areas to work on. And I don't think that it's going to be something that we can manage. You know, I think there's a lot of work to be done. I know a lot has been done. And I think we're going to see a lot of improvements over the next few years. I would love to see it all happen immediately, but I think there are so many bits we need to bring in, and we need to do it in a joined up and coherent way, so that we're not just doing token sessions. We're not having students do the session on racism and then it's finished. We want to bring it all together. So it needs to be built into the design of our new curriculum. And we need to work with, for example, the new integrated teachers to ensure that the sessions that are designed are linked together, and ensuring that that gives everybody the opportunity for the diversity of learning that they need. When we talk about decolonizing the curriculum, we are doing, that is a slightly more explicit request than some of these larger, slightly more high level pieces of work. And so to give you an example of what we mean when we talk about how we might decolonize our teaching, I'm going to show you this example I stole from a presentation from another school. And I will confess that I don't actually have a note of which school it was, but when I find out, I will thank them and ask for their permission in future to share this. So this example, you can read here, this is from a presentation early on in the students' Obs and Gynae block, and talks about the great James Marion Sims, who is the, as I'm sure you know, father of gynecology, and the Sims speculum is named after him. So this is the pre-version of this slide, but in a decolonized version, what has been added in is the fact that this man developed his techniques through a series of experiments on people who did not get the right or the opportunity to say no. And the lady pictured in the circle at the top of your screen there is a narca who had 30 operations carried out on her without anesthetic in order for him to perfect his technique. And I think, this is quite a powerful example of how the information that we give, particularly in a historical context, but I think it's important to be mindful that it's not just the history of medicine that is full of examples like this. We can actually help students to see how the knowledge that we have now is built on the back of more than just some rich white men doing clever stuff. And we can actually build that context and talk about the structural violence that parts of medical progress have been built on, how we benefit from that. I think these can be very powerful, but they do need to be done sensitively, and they need to be thought through. So as part of that thinking through, we have been very fortunate this year to have a student-led enhancement project to two Sarahs, Sarah and Sarah Lilly, worked their way through many of the blocks in the first to third year to have a look at where there were elements of what we teach that we could review with the intention of decolonizing. I'm very grateful to them for their hard work, and I know that their findings have been shared with the block leads. They also made some recommendations about system level changes we could make and other areas that we might want to review that they haven't had the opportunity to do. So we are really building on that at the moment. There are other areas where we have made progress so far. I've already mentioned the university's Bronze Race Equality Charter, and I know that they're continuing to work on that. And I've mentioned that we are developing new sessions across all years of the curriculum. We have a new member of staff starting with us on the 31st of January in the staff development team, who is going to have a remit to look at how we develop new staff training sessions around racism in particular, trying to offer a really meaningful staff training session for people. I know that many of you will have had the experience of doing the online equality and diversity modules, whether the NHS one or the university one, and I've not necessarily felt much more educated at the end of that. So what we are really wanting to do is to develop a session which is going to allow people the opportunity to explore their own experiences so far and to think about how they progress from here, which is no small ask, but I am confident that that will be in place this year. And I really encourage you to look out for that and to sign up as soon as you can to help us to develop those sessions. And lastly, Sarah Ross has been recruiting diversity ambassadors across all the years of the medical school, and has been really very pleased with the response. So we now have diversity ambassadors in all years who are working with us to also build on this approach to equality and diversity. So from there, I'm going to take you back to this picture. And I've used pictures like this before to talk about, so I've talked about the audience, but the other thing that I've always been struck by in this picture is, for me, it really brings home the metaphor of medical education more generally, how right from the beginning, right from when you start in medical school, the traditional approach has been to get people to focus in and in and in, to get people to concentrate on the smaller and smaller details, to learn the lists, to get down to the cell level, and to really get all of that detail. And I would say that while outcomes for graduates is quite high level, the lists have come out to us in the context of the medical licensing assessment are long lists of conditions that students need to know stuff about. Although I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. They haven't actually given us more detail than they should know this. But for me, that focus on the smaller and smaller and on the more and more detail, it can be very rewarding for some people. But there are a lot of people for whom that focusing down stops them from being able to see out the way. And it means that we collectively become unable to look up and see the horizon. And that bigger picture, that sweeping vista, that's where the creativity happens. That's where the magic happens, if you like. And I'm pretty sure I promised myself I wouldn't say magic during this talk, but this is where people get energy, they get the light. Now, it's intentional that I have used a picture here with a nice big rainbow, because for me, there's a real link between this broader view and, for example, this is the Dahlgren and Whitehead model of the determinants of health, which is often called the public health rainbow, where we encourage people, when we're talking about public health, we encourage people to think not just at the individual level, so your green blob down in the middle here, but to think wider and wider and wider, because all of these elements have an impact on people's health and on their well-being. And I think that there's a real value for us in helping our students to have a much better understanding of that integration, as well as them knowing all of the details of cell respiration that we want them to know. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive, and neither do the GMC. So here in the outcomes for graduates list, there are, particularly down in outcome 3, there is everything from understanding biomedical scientific principles, which is the second one in on the left, to health promotion and illness prevention, which along with the sociology next to it, are covering really, really big picture learning outcomes. And likewise, there's a specific learning outcome that our students will understand the health service and healthcare systems across the UK. These are big, complicated, and frankly, never-ending elements. So again, as I said around Dundee Doctor, some of the elements here are actually considered to be core. We need our students to understand all of it. But my argument is that there's quite a lot of plus here. And I think there's an overlap between the Dundee Doctor stuff I was just talking about and this, which we are formally calling the bigger picture. So when we are talking about the bigger picture, we are covering a whole load of very diverse topics, but the idea is that that is an expansion beyond those cores. So I think that so we're doing MMIs at the moment. We've been doing them for many weeks, as many of you will know, and thank you to all of you who've been helping out. It was mentioned to me last year by somebody that sometimes when you speak to these school pupils who are applying for medicine, they are already tired. They're already potentially burnt out before they've got to medical school. And then we spend a lot of time cramming stuff into their heads and really not giving them much in the way of an opportunity to find the things that they can build themselves on. And in fact, we squash their time so much that many of the leisure activities that they had before they came to medical school, for example, they no longer have time for. So what I would really like us to be able to do within the bigger picture strand of the new curriculum is to help students to find things that they're passionate about. It's so much easier to keep doing the stuff that you don't care that much about if you can see how it fits into everything else. And actually, I think that if we can help students find their passions, we'll help staff find their passions too, by giving staff an opportunity to explore and teach areas which are not core, like we've always done with the SSCs. This will help people to see the relevance of what they're doing a bit more and to want to do it, which I think is a real challenge at the moment because we are all, let's face it, pretty tired. So for me, the bigger picture is about expanding beyond the core areas, and I'm going to explore what I mean by that in just a moment. It's an opportunity for the core interests, key interests and other things to maybe keep going that bit longer and to help people to take on things like volunteering roles so that we can help our students to feel part of the community that they're in. That can be within school. So for example, our diversity ambassadors, I would say, very much fall into this, within their local community, within societies, such as music, that kind of thing. Just really finding ways to make that something that we are explicitly valuing rather than people feeling that they're cramming it in on the sides and having to keep quiet about it. And we'd really like to see that help our students to develop skills, particularly around activism and advocacy, so that they can be energized and active doctors in the future. And I know I sound hideously idealistic here, but I genuinely think that if we can build on that, we can help everybody to combat some of the burnout and disillusionment. I mean, not as much as 6 weeks holiday would do, don't get me wrong, but it will go some way to helping people to find their passions again. One of the ways that we might be able to reward and encourage this is through the Global Citizen Award. So NHS Tayside already run this award, and it's really about building rewards for people who have been engaged in volunteering and community engagement. There's a definition from the United Nations Academic Hub, which is still about 12 times as long as any definition should be, but is essentially about emphasizing local networks and communities and global networks and communities. And I sometimes think the word global in Global Citizen is not always helpful here, because we might not be trying to encourage all of our students to go to other parts of the world, but rather to build in their own community. But we are working on that at the moment. And we do have some local expertise in terms of global citizenship. Leslie Crichton has been helping me and Sarah Ross and Carolyn Tipton, who is our project lead for this, to think about how we might integrate the NHS Tayside work and the universities, for example. And then I learned as I researched this week that we also have Penelope Granger, who's been working with the dental school, and both of them got awards last year. So surely that means that they should be in a position to give us some of their expertise. And thanks to Leslie, because she already does. So how would we fit the bigger picture into what we're talking about, what we're teaching? So the first is that some of this is core. So some elements are bigger picture, but for everybody. And in particular, areas that we've been focusing on there are in sustainability, global health, equality and diversity. There are things around, for example, the health for people who are homeless, prison health, asylum seekers and refugee health. All of those are areas that we might want to develop as core, but then offer for all of these topics. The idea is that we will offer further reading so that anybody who finds that this sparks their interest has somewhere straightforward to go and get more information. And from there, hopefully they will find more reading, more resources, and other people to speak to who they could explore that topic further. We already offer some SSCs which allow students opportunities to do this, and we've been developing a service learning SSC over the last few years. So that's Carolyn Tipton and Neil Merrilees have been particularly leading that, and I'm really thrilled to see that how that is developing and giving students an opportunity to go out and work with third sector organisations during their SSC and learn about how that interacts with healthcare, for example. I think we've got more we could do around volunteering and service learning, and so we can do signposting and referring people in to make those contacts at the moment. But if we could develop the global citizenship award, for example, that would be a way of explicitly rewarding this work. And then again, coming back to the core and the core plus elements, I'd really like us to see these elements being emphasized within our reflective portfolios for students, to get them to articulate how the experiences that they have had link into their understanding of being doctors and make them better doctors. And then an area which has been on hold because of COVID and because of all the other disruptions to timetables and teaching and everything else, but I'm still very keen for us to develop over time, is to either expand grand rounds or monopolize some of them. Tom and I have talked about this before, so that we could bring some of these really interesting big picture topics in to an audience and getting students across the years to be aware that these things are happening. So for example, prison health, getting someone to come and talk about prison health from different aspects and how understanding what happens to people as they go through the criminal justice system has an impact on their health and the health of those around them. And I think those could be really valuable for everyone. And the thought is that we might set it up in such a way that we ask students to attend a number of the sessions through an academic year and to reflect on some of them, but not to make any given session compulsory. So as I say, that's very much something in development, but I can see this would be a really good opportunity to get people to come and talk about their main interests. We are developing a section within MedBlogs that is going to provide some of that signposting and further reading. And if you have a topic which you think would fit well into the bigger picture, we would be absolutely delighted to have your input into that. And if you want to write the blurb for us, we would be more than grateful. And so this site was developed over the summer by one of our students, Hamish Halliday, and I'm very grateful to him for all his hard work on it. He came up with the idea of including a picture which helped to show when you went into the website how all of these different things might have an impact on health. So this, again, this is a draft that's been drawn up by Eve Laws. And so the idea here is pretty much every element in this picture is one of the things which we were talking about as part of the bigger picture. So you've got a poster around healthcare for refugees. There's a private clinic out back. You've got a patient in a wheelchair, all sorts of different aspects, just to sort of help to show how the bigger picture is actually all the picture. And again, I'm unapologetically reused my slide from earlier because I think it's the same challenges, because these are the bits that are the plus, these are the bits that are the extra. Between them, they're what help our students to become the best possible doctors, but we have to make sure that that is being given the value. It needs to be given time, it needs to be rewarded, it needs to be visible and encouraged, and we need to be really clear about what it is that we want our students to do. But I'm hoping that I will bring you all with me so that you will see that this is valuable and you will agree with me. You're welcome to disagree, that this is something that we want to encourage. And then we can, if we are agreed on it as a community, that will help us to make it really happen and to keep it going beyond just one insanely optimistic woman's passion. So how will we know it's working? Well, I mean, I think I could come out with something very soft and fluffy here. And in some ways, it is a little bit soft and fluffy, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I would propose that we have evaluation built into this, particularly as we are doing student sessions. We want to know how the students are feeling about it, and we want to get their feedback so that what we are offering in these sessions is the most valuable it can be. But we will also be looking at these other levels. So are we getting engagement from our local community? Are they interested in this and helping us to take it further? What's it doing to our reputation? I would love for us to be the medical school who are really big on engagement in the future. And if we can get to a point where we are giving students awards for this, that's what I would think of that as being a measure of success. I'm nearly done. I'm hoping that you're all absolutely fired up now and absolutely desperate to get involved in all of these different aspects. If you are, it's really easy. Just let me know and I will point you in the right direction. There's always space within our little family for more people taking on these roles and these bits. And please do let me know if you've got any ideas, if you want to talk through any of this. I would absolutely love the opportunity to rave at you some more. Finally, just to signpost you, if you are able to access this site, this is our Celebrating Diversity section within Medblogs, and we have set it up so that you can access it without Medblogs login as well, because it's not meant to be just for our undergraduate students. So please have a look in there. And again, any feedback, anything you think we should be adding in, please let us know. I am finished and I've managed to rattle through it fast enough that hopefully we've got time for questions and everything. So now all I have to do is remember how to stop sharing. It is having lost.
There we go. Thanks very much, Ellie. That was great. You got through a huge amount of stuff in there. So thanks very much for getting through all that. I think it's interesting. We've talked about this a lot over the last 10 years. The anatomy, basic science, pendulum, as you say, swinging to and fro. And it's interesting that it is coming back the other way towards more time. When I took over as phase 2 convener, there was a phase 1, which was entirely basic science. And then we amalgamated that all together into SIP, as you'll remember, with the best intentions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it was the way medical education pedagogy was going, and it's interesting that it comes back the other way. And I don't think there's a right or wrong here, but
no, I agree. I think the other thing is that schools are changing, and what medical schools do has to respond to what happens in schools. And one of the things that we are aware of, and it's going to be particularly striking for the next few years, is that students' experience in schools has been very different. And so I think we've generally felt that what we need is to make the introduction to medical school much more gradual. The feedback we had a couple of years ago that the principles was like trying to drink from a fire hydrant has been quite resonant with us. And so actually some of expanding the time for the basic science at the beginning is about not trying to do so much in a given week, and instead to be reinforcing it in a different way, so that we're not cutting too much from what we do, but that we're not trying to get our students completely up to speed as quickly as we were, because it's not really realistic.
Yeah. It's a big leap from school to university, big leap. Does anyone have any questions? Yvonne pointed out that the example you used of the gynecologist was used by one of our students in Grand Rounds last year, as the same specific example. So, but I liked. It's interesting, isn't it? Because do we just not teach about that at all? And I don't want to talk about cancel culture, but do we just get over it completely? But that slide that you presented there gives the other side of things. How non-judgmental should we be about that sort of thing? It's clearly horrific what happened back there, but it moved science on.
Yeah, and I was intrigued by how it's interesting you use the phrase cancel culture. We have cancelled any doctor who had a Nazi affiliation. So I cannot for the life of me ever remember what vagus granulomatosis is now called, but it's not vagus granulomatosis, for example. Asperger's syndrome is endlessly debated about whether or not it's the right name now, because Asperger had Nazi associations. So we can quite rapidly change things around sometimes, and we can reevaluate how we describe some things when the political will is there. Collective political will, I mean. And so I would say that getting rid of the slide on Sims altogether is not the right thing to do. I think it's much more important that we actually have an acknowledgement that where we are now is on the back of all sorts of things. And our collective history is distasteful, and we should acknowledge that rather than ignore it.
Yep. It doesn't look like there's any burning questions from the audience, so we'll perhaps bring things to a conclusion. If you do have questions, I think I can speak for Ellie in that you can just contact her by email or the usual channels. I'm sure she'll be very happy to if you're offering your help, advice, feedback, comments. I'm sure she'll be very pleased to take them and see what can happen in building an even better medical school. So we'll call it a day there. Thanks very much to everybody, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Tom.